Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our cold weather project. My name is Brenda Corona, and we welcome you to this meeting on behalf of the Stakeholder Affairs Group. We do have a presentation for today's meeting. Rachel Milton from the Operation Compliance and Analysis Technical Lead, along with the Operation Metrics and Analysis team, will be here to support for any questions and discussion going on for today's call. We do want to go ahead and get some meeting reminders as this call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. If you do experience any technical issues during the call, feel free to message myself or my event producer, Tegan, and we will be able to help you. At this time, Tegan has shared a link on your chat where you will see the meeting invite list to those who are attending this call today. We thank you all for pre-registering, and we will provide that list with that link right there. Feel free to review that. You'll see everyone who's on the call. For asking a question during this call, please use the raise hand icon located in the lower toolbar in the middle of your screen. That raise hand icon will allow us to know if you have a question. Please keep your hand raised. We will call on you and we'll unmute you, but make sure do not mute yourself after you're unmuted. The WebEx does lock your capability when you're unmuted. When you do have a question and you're unmuted, please state your full name and affiliation before stating your comment. As well, just a reminder, my name is Brenda Corona, and Tegan will also be here to help us as our event producer, and we look forward for this call. For today's agenda, I will go ahead and introduce Rachel Milton, who will dive in more deeply on those topics, and I'll let her introduce herself as well, just to make sure if there's any questions. But I'll be here in the background just helping out. Go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you, Brenda. So good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Melton, and I work with the Operations Compliance team. For today's agenda, so I want to be clear that this audience in this call is for the Extreme Cold Weather Project, but this is specifically for California ISO generator owners for physical NERC registered BES generation. So we're really targeting at CAISO BA. For all other generators in the RC West footprint, please work with your balancing authority for the process on collecting this data to provide RC West. This is a similar process as we went through with the data that was requested by July 1st, but this is an update to that data, so it will have to be resubmitted to be provided in accordance with the data that was requested in the NERC Level 3 alert. So that's what's driving this change, and we'll get into it with a little bit more detail, but I just wanted to be clear on the audience for today's call. All right, so for today's agenda, we're going to be doing a review of the current TOP3 data request for cold weather, and then we'll dive a little bit into some background on the NERC Alert Level 3. We'll then discuss a proposed change for the TOP3 data request, which is 3140A, talk about the draft changes that we've made, and then a change to the template to provide this data, which is the BA Extreme Weather Template Update. For next steps, we'll talk about comments. We have these draft documents both posted for any comments or feedback that you may have to submit a city ticket or feedback via CAISO.com, contact us. And these updates are planned to be effective on October 12th at this time. All right, and I see a comment in the chat. So this is for NERC registered sites. Yes, this is for NERC BES generation and targeting generator owners in the California ISO footprint for all resource types. Good question. All right, let's go into the next slide here. So for our current TOP3 data specification request for cold weather, we've modeled this based on the standards changes that were made back in April with the data request effective date of July 1st. So we sent out messaging to the generator owners in our footprint to submit via city to be aggregated. This was submitted from the generator owners directly or their designee, which is commonly the scheduling coordinator, and we received it for more than 85% of generators in our footprint, and we received the BA data separately from the RC West footprint with that modeling effort. And as a reminder, if you have new BES generation projects, please submit this data. We assume it's fairly static data, so it won't be, continuously coming in, but for new generation, or if those numbers change, please feel free to use the template and submit that. Okay. Let's move on to the next slide here. So after we made the data specification change, there was the NERC alert level 3, and there was 8 essential actions, primarily targeting at the generator owners and submitting that data. So the first action was with respect to the extreme cold weather temperature calculation, which there is some guidance there publicly, as well as for EOP 11R7 to add critical components to the plan for this upcoming winter season. The third action was identifying which resources need additional freeze protection measures, and if it's possible by this upcoming winter season. And the fourth action being identifying which resources experienced extreme cold weather events in the past winter season. Next slide, please. The fifth and sixth actions were about TOPs and BAs and seeing if there were any potential updates to their emergency plans. And the seventh action was in reference to the previous essential actions 1 and 2 for generators to provide its RC, BA, and TOP the extreme cold weather temperature for its location prior to the next winter season, and whether those generator cold weather critical component freeze protection measures will not be implemented on components prior to this upcoming winter season. The last essential action talks about the net winter capacity megawatts and has a few scenarios on generators sharing those responses with their respective BAs and TOPs to allow for updates to any operating plans before this upcoming winter season. So these last two essential actions, 7 and 8, are really what drove our change for these templates to be updated. That way we can aggregate this information and use this information instead of various procedures. Let's move on to the next slide. So we discussed with the Joint Cold Weather Task Force from an RC level, we gathered the different BAs and discussed how they were planning on implementing these changes in their data specifications and aggregating this information. So for extreme cold weather temperature, we got a high amount of responses saying that they wanted to update their data specification to include this language and with the calculations associated with it, since it is different than the standard. And then for the generator cold weather critical component freeze protection measures, there was a handful that wanted to share this information in a format other than the emergency plan reviews process, as TOPs and BAs currently update their emergency plans on an annual basis, and this information is specific to generators, so that information might get lost, in a larger procedure, and we wanted something a little more stable to share that information. Let's go to the next slide. For net winter capacity megawatts, again, we got responses that entities wanted to share this information in another format besides, necessarily the NERC template or aggregating this data into the existing plan reviews process, and got mixed reviews regarding updating the modeling template to include this capacity information. We did hold a discussion about how some generators may not apply to even submitting the extreme cold weather temperature to NERC. So if that is being worked out and not being submitted, there is the option to just submit a no option in the data submittal to California ISO. That way we record that response, but it may not be applicable. Okay, let's go perfect onto the slide. So for the draft TOP3 data specification, we've updated our language to include the data items that were discussed previously with essential actions 7 and 8. So that includes the extreme cold weather temperature, ECWT if known, the generator cold weather critical component freeze protection measures if they're going to be implemented prior to the upcoming winter season, and then the net winter capacity in megawatts with the scenarios that were defined in NERC Alert 3. We've put this data request effective date as December 1st, 2023, and to follow the same process for the previous submittal. So this would be via a city ticket, and the generator owner or their designee, which may be as commonly found, the scheduling coordinator, would provide this to us via a city ticket. So this would be submitted hopefully by December 1st, 2023, and then for new resources, and then a static value as practicable for existing resources if this value does change. So we've added this proposed text to match the NERC Alert 3. And I'll take a pause here and see if there are any questions. I don't see any in the chat at this point, but I just want to pause and see if there are any questions.
Let's go ahead and take Matthew Hawkins. Please go ahead and introduce yourself, Matthew.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I was just curious, this new format hasn't, this template hasn't gone out as of yet, is that correct? This is just kind of pre-information?
That's a great question. So the data request is up for draft review as of now, as well as the draft template. So that is a great point. And maybe I should just move on to my next slide, which is a good tee up for the draft template.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the draft extreme weather template, we've made a version 2 update, which is shown on the slide, as well as it's posted to kaiso.com, because I realize it can be hard to read. So feel free to zoom in with the WebEx settings, or we can put links in the chat as well. So the template is shown, with all of the columns at the top. As you can see, the first 4 columns are existing fields. We kept that on the template so we can accurately identify the resource, and this can be copied from the previous submittal. So if you still have the previous submittal that you used before July 1st, you can use that and just use it to resubmit the data. What we did is we added those columns, which are shown on the bottom, to see if the extreme cold weather temperature is known for the asset. We have a field for the extreme cold weather temperature, if known, with a link to the NERC calculation guidance, a yes or no question if the generator cold weather critical component freeze protection measures will be implemented on components prior to this upcoming winter season. And then the net winter capacity megawatts is defined in NERC Alert 3, and columns J through M talks about the various scenarios that match NERC Alert 3. So it can be a copy and paste from their template to this template. Thanks, Brenda, for putting that in the chat. So here's the template. So why don't I try that again, then pause and see if there are any questions, either in the chat or in the call line.
Yes, Rachel, we do have a raised hand and a few questions in the chat. So let's go ahead and take Marty for NCPA. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. It said I was muted. Okay. Yeah, so Marty Hostler, I'm the Reliability Compliance Manager for NCPA. I realize that this is a standard that pretty much was forced on us because of other issues, but what I'm trying to figure out is what is the value of all this information to the ISO, and what is the ISO really going to use this for? Is it just because NERC said we had to do it, or is there some value added in all this?
So I can take a start at that, but Tricia, Olga, feel free to chime in. So this data is currently being aggregated for the KISO BA footprint, as well as we're gathering it for the RC footprint. with the modeling process, and we're gathering these values internally to review. But a main part of our adaptation to the cold weather process is through our existing outage coordination process. So that is the main driver as well, besides this data, but this data is being aggregated and reviewed.
And just to add on to that, this is Tricia. So what we have been doing for a few years related to extreme heat events for summer planning is we've got a forecast process that's looking 7 days out and looking for, you know, extreme changes both on the CAISO BA system as well as on the RC West area. And what we're also doing that for actually winter period as well, looking for where we have just really out of normal ranges for temperatures, you know, in different pockets, you know, throughout our BA. So this data, if we see like an extreme weather in the forecast, you know, we're looking at it 7 days out and each operating day leading up to, you know, the day ahead market and the day ahead, and it'll help our operations planning group assess the risk. So it's possible that like the resource outages might not have started coming in yet, but based on what we're seeing, if we're anticipating that some resources could end up on outage if they don't get started before the cold weather gets here, you know, we could potentially start doing exceptional dispatches or taking kind of other actions ahead of time to make sure resources are online early and not getting caught where they won't be able to start. The other kind of procedure that factors into this is also the coordination that the BA does with the natural gas companies. And so if we're seeing things that might be impacting fuel supplies upstream and then have the potential, you know, to end up in an OFO order or something like that that could restrict resources' ability to operate, then that also we can start coordinating ahead of time to make sure that we've got enough resources in each area to be sure that the system can balance. Now, hopefully that's helpful.
Well, that is helpful because when I asked the drafting team how all this, what they're going to use this information for, they couldn't answer it. This was a while back when they were developing the standard, and because I'm glad to see that you're going to use it, and I'm glad to hear that you mentioned exceptional dispatch, because that was one of my recommendations, to make that mandatory for them to dispatch units prior to cold weather events instead of waiting to the last minute.
Yes, definitely. And you know, it's one of those things where the standard isn't mandating like how it's incorporated in the processes, although it looks like there might be some other things maybe coming in the planning standards here not far off in the future. But yeah, we're, like I said, we're just basically adapting what we're already doing for extreme heat events, and we're adapting it now with this cold weather data.
Okay. Are you also keeping extra contingency reserves or spend margin?
We could be, and those are the types of actions we start considering, and also
Okay.
like looking what's happening with our neighboring areas as well. Like, you know, if we think our neighbors might also be having some issues, then we'll have limitations on imports. We will need to be carrying more internally.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marty. Good questions. Is there anyone else in the queue?
I don't see anyone in the queue. Tegan, do we have anyone logged in audio only for any questions?
No, there are no hands raised and audio only.
Okay, great. I see the questions in the chat have all been answered, except for one regarding how will the data be provided for new resources prior to approval for COD. So the process would stay the same with regards to a city ticket. And this is, you know, prior to approval for COD for new resources, or if the values change for existing resources, entities can submit a city ticket anytime to update this information. Brenda, are there any other questions that you see? Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
We did get a question about this call being recorded. For those who joined us late, it will be recorded and posted under miscellaneous stakeholder meetings on kaiso.com. We'll send that link over to everyone just to have it in your hand, but we also posted other documents. But that's all I see from my end.
Okay, I see 2 people have their hand up.
Tegan, can you go ahead and unmute Marty? I think he was first. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi there, Marty again. So I had another question, and this is regarding solar facilities. Because NCPA, so we don't own the solar facilities, but we're the schedule coordinator for them. And some of them may be considered BES units since they aggregate up to a common 138 or 230 bus. So I'm wondering how we are to answer those questions if we say we're only scheduling 10 megawatts of a 100 megawatt facility. Or, because I realize that the ISO has a separate modeling system on how they derate solar based on time of day and weather patterns. So how do you anticipate, is solar going to be different data form or the same? And how do you anticipate us providing that?
That's a good question, Marty. So the request is really at the resource level. So I do understand that, yeah, sometimes resources are shared and could have multiple parties scheduling for them. And I think, as Rachel mentioned, we would be depending, like in the outage coordination process for, you know, each resource, let's say, is divided into separate shares. So in the master file, it almost looks as if like they're different resources. So, you know, each SC would need to derate for their portion accordingly, and you'd have to coordinate. But from a data perspective on this template, it's just at the resource level. We don't have it broken out into those different SC parts. So that might be something we need to look at on our side in terms of like how the information ends up getting mapped back to the outage process. So we'll take that back and talk with the team about it.
Okay, thanks. That was just a concern of ours. We might not schedule all the solar facilities at the same interconnection point.
Yep, that makes sense. And just in terms of template, there's no difference in the template for a solar resources versus another type of resource, because the standard doesn't differentiate, you know, different requirements by fuel type. So.
Let's go
Go to the
ahead
next
to,
caller.
yeah, go ahead.
Angie, and this question is not really related to this topic, but is this pre-registering becoming common with the ISO? Because most of the stakeholder meetings that I participate in don't require it, but this one and another one did. And by the time I got the link, the meeting was almost over. So I'm just trying to get a sense of, is this a new requirement for KISO for all meetings?
Hi, Michael, right? Michael?
Yeah.
Hi, Michael. Yes, so from part of the stakeholder affairs group, we are trying to be more transparent with the attendee list. So therefore, the event services vendor doesn't provide us to see each other's names unless you're a panelist. So what we're doing as a courtesy is providing that attendee list that we'll be giving during the meeting. Like you said, it is having some issues where you're registering kind of late and then you're not being added on. So we're working around with the event services team to make sure what we can do to make sure, but it is something that we're trying to move forward. But if your feedback is that it's not helping, we can just keep it how it was. We can do that as well. But it is helping for those who want to know who's on the call in real
No,
time.
my feedback is if this is going to be a requirement for all ISO meetings going forward, please
Yes.
let people know, because I didn't realize until today that it was required, and plus it took 20 minutes to get the link. So I don't, that's why, if this is going to be a new process for ISO overall, just please let everyone know, because I have not seen anything that says this is now the new process. So that's all I had.
Okay, thanks. Will do. So Matthew Hawkins from Ormont Technologies, go ahead. I think he has a question.
Hi, so my question was about inverter-based resources. Right now, I have confirmation from the CAISO that um, our facilities that aren't NERC registered don't need to provide this information, so we didn't provide it on July 1st. I do have other resources that I did provide for, but specifically inverter-based resources, we didn't supply information for, but there is a change coming out with NERC where they will be changing registration requirements for inverter-based resources down to a lower level, interconnection voltage. Does CAISO have any plans for asking for this information once that becomes effective? Is there any thoughts from CAISO that they'll ask before those registration requirements take effect? Or has that not even been considered until after NERC changes their rules of procedure?
That's a great question. This is Tricia. So we would be adding that geo IBR applicability to this as well. So yeah, we need to look at the timing on that and when we make those changes effective in the data specification now, versus in the future. If it would be helpful, we could actually include that as part of this update, just in anticipation that that's coming.
Yeah, so I think that it's helpful to know that it will be coming. It's less helpful to say, well, now you're required, right? Because we didn't do any of the work prior for these ones because we had confirmation that we wouldn't have to submit. So I don't know. I'm just curious on kind of the CAISO's timing for implementing. I would imagine that it would be until NERC's official change came out. So just something to think about, and maybe send out some information on planning from the CAISO and when they'll expect it from the IBRs.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And we do typically do that. Like if let's say a new standard's coming into effect, like the standards that are in drafting right now, eventually those will settle out, and then we'll have some new requirements related to that. We might have our procedure update effective coincident with the NERC date, but then the effective date for the data provision within the request itself can actually be pushed out a little bit. So like we did with the July submission, those standards were actually effective last April, and we gave until July for submission because we just wanted to be ahead of the winter season. So I think we would do that with the next round of standards changes and with the Geo IBR as well, that we would give time.
Great, thank you. That answers my question.
Rachel, do we have any questions that you'd like to read out loud? We can go ahead and continue on with the attendee list that are raise hands icon.
Yeah, let's go with the raise hand icon. I think I've been answering them in the chat.
Okay, great. All right, let's go ahead, Tegan. Unmute Michael. All right, I think you're on mute, double muted, but Michael, your hand is raised for a question. Oh, he lowered it. Okay, Jeffrey.
So we'll go to the next caller. Jeffrey?
Late for the meeting, but what I'm looking at is I was looking at the PDF called Extreme Cold Weather Project, and I apologize if you've answered this already, but so the data items you're looking for is the design temperature, historical operating temperature, performance under cold weather? And is that, I just need to, we, as an operator, is that the only information you're looking for?
Hi, that's a good question. So that's our current data specification request for cold weather temperature. We've expanded it, so that would be in column D here that's shown on the slide. So that would be one temperature value, and then we've added columns F through M per NERC Alert 3. That's Essential Action 7 and 8, which talks through the extreme cold weather temperature, the cold weather critical component freeze measures, and then the capacity values.
Okay, I mean, if I'm a operator sub megawatt, I mean, is that really critical that you get this information from me, or?
Good question. So this is for physical California ISO BA and NERC BES level generator resources only. And I see a question in the chat about how to tell if a resource is NERC registered BES generation. I'm looking, I think there is some guidance out there from NERC that goes into detail on that. I'll look for that link in the meantime. But does that help answer your question?
I don't, Rachel, I think Jeffrey's still on mute. Tegan, can you unmute him just to confirm? Thanks.
Oh yeah, that answers my question.
Okay,
Oh, and
great.
it's under NERC.com. Sorry, the guidance for BES qualifications is under NERC's website on their homepage if you go to NERC and then About Us.
Okay, got it. NERC.com, okay. .org. Is it .org or .com?
It says .com.
Okay.
All right, are there any other hands raised?
I don't see any hands besides Jeffrey. I think his questions answered. But we did provide that updated list for the attendees. Feel free to see that from Tegan, who just shared that. But other than that, Rachel, let me know when you'd like to move on to the next slide. I'm happy to move that slide for you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next slide so people can see this information.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Tegan. You were sharing your screen. Good job. Okay, let's go back.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
All right, so for next steps here, which may answer some of the questions in the chat. So we've posted the draft documents. Feel free to review and let us know if you have any feedback or questions or comments via a city ticket. We have a commenting period available until October 5th, 2023 to see if we have any strong opposition. But feel free to review and use those extreme weather template updates, as well as review the 3140 which is the TOP3 data specification updates. We're planning to make these effective the following week, which would be October 12th, 2023. And then that data request, as we mentioned, would be December 1st, 2023. So we'll be sending out following messages to our audience to remind you of that submission in October as well as November. So the template for BA Extreme Weather is available on the meeting page for today's meeting, but it's also available in the previous location, which is CAISO.com, Market and Operations. Under Network and Resource Modeling, there's a Resource Data Submission section. And then 3140A is there on CAISO.com under Rules in our Operating Procedures section. So if there are any questions, please feel free to let us know after this call via a city ticket or on CAISO.com under Contact Us. but please note that the contact us space does not allow for file attachments. So please leave that just for any questions, but the submissions will all come through City directly from the generator owner or through a delegate, which is commonly the scheduling coordinator. All right, I'm looking through the chat to see if there are any questions that I may have missed. I see one regarding the current template that's under review, or will there be a separate notice sent out when the template's finalized? So feel free to review and use that BA extreme weather template today. It's there on the public website, but we will be sending out our normal procedure communications when 3140A is published, which we're expecting for October 12th. And then with respect to RDFIDs, so for generators that don't have this information, the resource ID is really the key way we can correctly identify that resource. So if you know your RDFID, feel free to provide it. But if not, if you don't know it or it's not found with the posted modeling documentation, feel free to leave out that information. Okay, I see a question. If RC West is planning to update the IRO 10 data request to align with CAISO BA's TOP3 data specification, yes, we are. So we just had data exchange working group roughly about a week ago. So that information is available for RC West BAs and TOPs on RC portal under the data exchange information. So will TOPs who are also registered as GOs, submittal of the new template for IRO 10 data requests submitted via RIMS be shared with CAISO BA and fulfill both requests? Yes. So you don't need to do a double submittal to City and RIMS. Only one is needed for us to get the latest and greatest information. So since you have access to both, I'd say pick whichever you'd like. And then I see a question to confirm on the net winter capacity values will be the EIA definition of net winter capacity and not the PMAX or NQC. I would say to refer to NERC's guidance in their NERC level 3 alert. I know they released a frequently asked questions document regarding and guidance regarding these net winter capacity values. So I would say the same values that you're sending them could be used in this effort to send to us. We're not planning on or don't have any intention of any deviation from what NERC's requesting. So whatever you're providing them, if that's an omission or whatever value, I would say use the same for us. And then I see some specific questions on NERC BES guidance. I would say to refer to NERC's website to understand if you are a BES facility or not. I'm not sure regarding who it's being sold to and the megawatt values. So I would refer to the NERC guidance to see if you are a BES generator or not. Trisha, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, so the question was like if my client owns less than 50 megawatts and it's being sold to a city and not to CAISO directly, is it considered a NERC BES facility? So there are resources like that in our area where they might even be like a cogen that's, supporting, some kind of refinery or manufacturing process or whatever. Those aren't all necessarily NERC registered resources if they're not providing energy to the BES. And so, I think they should look at the NERC guidance to see if they qualify, like if depending on where they're interconnected, their size, or if they're using BES transmission to get from where they're located to the city where it's being delivered, then they might need to register, even if they're not going through the CAISO market. So we have a lot of those resources registered in our systems, even if they're not participating directly in the markets.
Thanks, Trisha. All right, I'll try to answer some of the other questions in the chat. If entities can submit now or have to wait till 10/12 for the template to be finalized. I know some entities are planning to submit to NERC in early October and are ANSI to submit. So I'd say feel free to submit as soon as you have that information. But we will communicate if there are any changes. I don't anticipate any changes as this matches the NERC alert level 3. And if you can submit prior to December 1st, definitely, of course, don't wait till the last minute. It would be helpful for our team in processing to get this information as soon as you have it. And then would we need to redo the submission if the file changes? Yes. So if these values do change for existing resources, just try to submit it as soon as you can with a new city ticket, and we'll process those changes so we have the latest and greatest. Along that same line, will the template continue to include the NERC alert essential actions for future years? Meaning, do we have to provide this for 2024, 2025, et cetera? That is a great question. So I'm curious myself on where this is going to evolve, you know, with the NERC cold weather project. I think we're all kind of thinking the same thing as what the future years will hold. So I would think that as of right now, it's going to remain static until the cold weather project has future guidance. Trisha, Olga, do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with that. Part of the reason why we added this to the data specification at this point is because it looks like that's the direction the standard development is going to go, where, you know, the generators have to collect this information and then provide it to their BA at a minimum. So, but yeah, we might have to refine it further depending on where that standards development, you know, kind of shakes out.
We do have a hand raised. I'll go ahead and unmute them. Sean, your line is unmuted.
I don't know. What does it say? I'm still on the conference call.
Sean, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, Tegan, I don't think he's I think he unmuted himself for something else because he's talking about something different. Let's go ahead and get back to him later if he has a question. But Sean,
I'll go ahead and lower.
yeah, go ahead.
There.
Yeah, 1 second. Well, as we wait, feel free to raise your hand if you do have a question that was submitted in chat and we might have missed, but we're doing our very best to answer the chat questions at this time. We are getting a lot of them, so just want to give thanks to everyone for their patience as we provide those responses. And let's see. For those who wanted to see the attendee list, feel free to try it out on Microsoft Edge. But we are working on a few items to just make sure we're helping out with these new process our team is trying to do.
Thanks for your help, Brenda. I think for the chat, I'm currently looking for that link. I just started looking for the NERC registered BES, like their definition for BES. So I'll put that in the chat when I have that. And then if you're having trouble with city access, so what is the best support to get the problems resolved? So anyone who has access to CAISO systems has a user access administrator. So I would say contact your user access administrator. But if you're having like an urgent issue, please feel free to contact our service desk. And that information is all on the CAISO website. I see another question that just came in that this is only for NERC registered facilities, correct? Yes, that is correct. We have 7 hydro units, only 2 of those are NERC registered, so the data is only due for those 2. Yes, that is correct. And you can regurgitate the NERC template to the SC and they'll submit to CAISO via a city ticket. So yes, the NERC data in the template, but we would like, instead of the NERC template, if you would use the one that's posted on our website, the BA Extreme Weather template. And the reason for that is we need to be able to associate your resource to our resource ID. With the NERC template, it says like, what is the geo coordinates and your zip code? We will have no idea which resource you're talking about if you submit the NERC template and not be able to identify it. So we need to know the resource ID in order to properly associate that resource. The resource ID is critical. And thank you, Tricia, for the help. So I put in the chat the NERC guidance that they have and their rules of procedure on like the definitions on BES. Okay, I think someone has their hand up.
Go ahead. Joey, your line is unmuted. Joey Zakowski, your hand is raised.
Can you hear
your line is unmuted. Yes, we can.
Thank you. Took a couple of steps to get unmuted there. Yeah, I just wanted to see if I can get a little clarification for something that was said earlier regarding using Pmax values, or I think you might have said EIA values should be used. Can you elaborate on that again? I don't know if I caught that whole statement. I just want to make sure we're using the correct megawatt values for the submittal.
Hey, Joey. Yes, that's a good question. So earlier there was a question on like which value to use with the PMAX or the EIA guidance. And I reiterated that you should use whatever value that you're submitting in the NERC Alert Level 3. They have a frequently asked questions document and guidance on how to submit those values for calculating the extreme cold weather temperature or the capacity megawatts values. So the same values that are being submitted for that effort should be used for this effort.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah, good question. And I believe we've answered the questions in the chat. If there's something that I'm missing, please feel free to resubmit. And sorry if I missed it, but I think we've got everything in the chat for the time being.
Great. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, I know we've got 10 minutes, so I'll just give another pause for a minute or two and see if there's any lasting questions. But thank you all for your engagement today. We really appreciate you asking these questions. It's easier to hop on a call and ask all of this. So thank you for participating, registering today, and all of your engagement. And the RDFID. So this is a unique identifier to a resource that's used in our modeling process. So if you do not have this information, what we need at minimum is the resource ID, but the RDFID may be available to you with the modeling documentation associated to the resource. Okay, well, I only see one other question in the chat regarding access to the recording. And slide 12 is the last slide. So Brenda, would you be able to provide some guidance on when the recording will be available on the public website?
Yeah, so I will work with Tegan and she will be providing that recording to this meeting in the next 2 to 3 business days. Just confirming, Tegan, is that correct? Just making sure it'll take about 2 or 3 business days. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Yeah, I noticed that we did have a lot of good questions as well. So let me know if any of these questions are useful to be shared, but hopefully everyone was able to track that during their meeting today to see those questions and links. But feel free to let us know if you have any more questions. Feel free to email us at ISO at isostakeholderaffairs.com, ikaiso.com. But other than that, we'll go ahead and close this meeting and give everyone a few minutes of their time. But we look forward to having that recording posted, maybe possibly Monday, so we can share that. Okay. All right, Tegan, we can go ahead and close this call. Thanks so much.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.